Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see everyone here. So I just wanted to check in with folks. The first question I posed was how we were feeling. And according to your numbers, some folks are doing okay, but some are going through it for sure. And I think it is coming up to midterms. We're probably getting a lot of different papers or assignments. And then we're still in remote. So for those who are going through it, please reach out, or I'll reach out to you to see how you're doing in terms of this class, if you're keeping up or not. Yeah, we'll figure out ways to support. And the second question, kind of related to the remote learning, the vaccines are coming out. Has anyone taken it? Or have it, I mean? Doesn't look like it. Oh, your mom will. Okay. My dad did too. So I'm looking forward to a lot of things that you mentioned. I think being on campus, everyone wants to run into someone, a friend. And I think grabbing coffee, having lunch, walking around the library seems to be a common thing in this class. And I hope that happens sooner than later. So let's cross our fingers and figure out what this will look like. But keep your head up. We're almost halfway into the semester, and things are hopefully looking up for folks. So cool. Thanks for folks for sharing where they're at. Anyone want to share their thoughts about the vaccine? Oops. Let me turn off the music. I don't think it'll be the end all. Yes, I think we should take for sure precautions still. The vaccine can help, but it's not the final solution to a lot of things that are going on in terms of the COVID and the spreading, and also the variances of it. So we'll see what happens. Oh, Nia works in childcare. What age bracket you work in, Nia? The little ones? Newborn or older? I'm guessing you work with a range of folks. Oh, toddlers and newborns. That's a fun age. My son is almost 2 years old. That's a good age. Janella, we should talk soon. I think, yeah, looks like you have a lot on your plate. I think educators, folks working in education, folks working in childcare are now getting access to the vaccine. I should be able to get it, but I've been having a difficult time setting an appointment because it seems like it fills up pretty quickly. So we'll see how that works out. I've been looking in Daly City and San Francisco since I live in Daly City and work in San Francisco. So we'll see. Yeah, the vaccine. I was wary of it in the beginning. It looks like it's working well. I know there's some concerns about it, but also determined by like your own personal health and how the vaccine might, you might respond to that vaccine. So I would check in with a doctor for sure before you do that. Every appointment placed, yes, Nia, everything is booked. Even, I know there's walk-ins too, but that's even crazier. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Um, and I don't know if people heard, but they're like passing around codes so people could jump the line, I guess you could say, or cut the line. Yeah, it's just people are trying to figure ways to get to it. Um, but yeah, let's see what happens. Um, I hope the vaccine will give us more opportunities to do things outside. Looks like a lot of people just want to hang out outside too. Um, I think it was Josh, I think, or Rixel was talking about like touching grass or something. So yeah, you still could touch grass. There's still parks, but you probably just want to be or a tree. I'm not sure where y'all are at, but there's parks. You still could take walks, but I guess if you're very careful, they kind of stop you from doing that. Um, take walks by the ocean. Just be careful. Also, it's another way just to get out. I feel like everyone stays in. So if you're having a hard time, for sure, make an effort to walk around Ocean Beach, walk around Golden Gate Park. Maybe when it's not too busy, if you're concerned about um, being exposed to to COVID. So some things, I guess, to consider. I still try to run, but here and there just to get out of the house, just get my mind off things. If people like to run too. Um, cool. So I will be sending emails to certain people today or tomorrow. Sounds like some folks uh, are going through it. So look for that email. Um, so going back to what are we doing today? Um, I think today's pretty chill. Um, it's kind of exciting because we get to work on a possible research topic that you would be interested in working with uh, a group of your peers. And we'll kind of debrief on the homework from last Thursday about the history of class and the fictions about race. We'll do a quick little activity about that. And then I'm going to kind of break down what the ethical historiography guiding principles are. So, why are we doing it? What's the importance and significance of having this project, and why we're doing it as a group too? So, we'll break up into groups, and maybe this group may not work out for you, or it might work out for you in terms of who you want to work with, but it'll be random for sure. But I want you to just come up with topics in your head. Maybe having conversations with your peers will jog something and encourage you to do a particular topic. So, and then after that, we'll just wrap up. How's that sound for folks? Good. So not a lot of lecture from me, but working with your classmates on this historiography project. Cool. I know it's 6th week, but we try to start it off early so you all are like thinking about it rather than trying to go into uh, all-nighter modes and trying to figure out how to write a chapter. But I'll break that down too. So the debriefing of the homework. So we read the history of class and fictions about race in America, and I'm going to put you into pairs, and you're just going to talk about it. What stood out to you the most about the readings from Thursday? Did you experience anything like this in your education? So, in terms of like what you learned about particular communities, um, did you see that reflective in the books, the text that you used, or the teachers that they kind of described how they pick particular high school teachers in um, assignments of the history classes and social science classes. So was that part of your experience at high school? And then what topics do you feel have been left out of U.S. historical narrative and why? So maybe going through those textbooks in high school, you're like, oh, I don't see this particular community, or they didn't really elaborate more about this community. I would have loved to learn more about this part of the history. So it's about 3:17. I mean, sorry, 2:17. Um, I'll give you what 3 to 4 minutes just to talk in pairs, and then we'll kind of come back and share as a class what examples you have. So real quick, put you into groups. There's a couple chats. So other questions before I send you all into breakout rooms? Welcome back. So if you're in room 2 or 4, I think it was Meili and Nee and the Veronicas. I want to start off with you at least, and then open it up to the class. Is everyone back? Let me double check. Where's my numbers? A couple people are still missing. Yeah. Okay, we're all back. So, what did you think about the readings? What were your takeaways? So, if someone, either Nee or Veronica, could share, would be great.
Hi. So Nee and I were discussing about how shocking it was for us to learn about how most of the or if not all of the states in America don't require a major or a minor. Um,
Mm.
Sorry, let me silence my phone. um, don't require a major or a minor to in history in order to teach history.
Mhm.
And when we reflected back on our education, but in like elementary and middle school, we could really see that our instructors weren't very interested, and also how they heavily relied on the textbook because they had no background knowledge of their own.
Yeah. So you're assigned a class, and then you're trying to figure out how to teach it at the same time, learn it, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
And also, I was telling her that, sorry, let me see, point C. What type of thing had been left out? I was basically, one of the things that I learned about in another metro class was that there's a lot of Filipino history in the Bay Area and in California.
Mhm.
And I was just explaining to me that it was so shocking to me to learn about how um, all of the Filipino work was left out of the whole Cesar Chavez story, especially in my history book and in my classes. Um, so I wish I would have learned more about that. And I wish I would have learned more about just the discrimination that happened towards Filipinos and just Asian Americans in general
Mhm.
in the Bay Area and in California.
Yeah, that particular period of time with the farm laborers, I'm assuming most of y'all are familiar with Cesar Chavez and his important work, um, trying to fight for better wages and conditions for all farm workers, not just Latinos. And Filipinos had been around for a while. They've been striking since the beginning, I guess you could say, from Hawaii all the way up to Seattle. So we have a long history. It just doesn't necessarily get recognized the same way. There's reasons why that is the case. Cool. Thank you, Veronica and me. How about Meili and Veronica? What did y'all take away from the readings?
We were just like points as like Veronica and me did say, but we're just talking more of like our experiences like within education. It's just kind of crazy to see that like teachers like in high school or like in whatever like grade level that you're in, like they kind of just go off the, the textbook, or if not like what common core is set.
Mm-hmm.
And we are just talking about more of like what topics like that have been left out, is um either like Latinx get out, or like either or more in depth like why these things happen,
Mm-hmm.
rather than just like, oh, this was set in place and here you go, and then you're just going to go based off of that and then do your own research on it. Because obviously when you do your own research, like there's still going to be that fake research on that.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I think I heard most of what you said. You were cutting in out, but in general, it's, I think, in essence, you're sharing with us, yeah, how teachers are just following the textbooks, and then the textbooks aren't necessarily accurate, and you're encouraged to do more research on your own. And what is that narrative out there in terms of who's doing the research on these particular communities or periods of time, I think is often skewed or biased. And I think the last 5 weeks or so, we've been talking about, yeah, how marginalized communities have been framed in history or silenced, like the Asian American experience around farm laborers. So cool. Anyone else want to share something that they discussed?
Well, um, I guess I just want to share out like
Mm-hmm.
I think this happened during my AP history class in high school. My teacher kind of like had a maternity leave because he was he's what they call his girlfriend was pregnant. I'm not sure, or
Yeah.
wife. Yes, there we go. His wife was pregnant, and we had a substitute who was teaching the class for like 3 months, and it was horrible because he did not know anything about history. And I would have thought that this school district or the school itself would, because they manage all the substitutes and stuff, would find someone who can substitute for like teaching history lesson. But that was not his alley, and he could not explain us to what was the bullet point was about, and what happened during the continental events. And it was just like all over the place, messy. And when the AP test happened, I think we really got screwed over because those 3 months worth of information was just like we didn't have any guidance direction because our teacher kind of left, so it was kind of hard to sustain.
Yeah. Sorry to hear that happened. And then, as we already discussed, teachers are thrown into certain assignments. There's not like you have your top team of substitutes who come in and just know everything and present everything and make it all engaging. Sometimes they're just thrown in. And it's kind of reflective of our educational system. Like, even, do we really prioritize education in the society? We think we do, but the money isn't there, which means it doesn't encourage people to be teachers, one. So those who are there because they love to teach, and it doesn't pay that well. So they're there for the passion of it all. And unfortunately, sometimes it's just those who just want to become a substitute and make some money and get out kind of deal, which is the other spectrum of that. And then they realize they don't want to be a teacher because of the difficulties of it. And you have the structural and institutional lack of support. And then even in the textbooks, how they remember certain histories. So I think they were talking about this concept of slavery and how they were how it's even framed within the textbooks, and some states are kind of hesitant to even talk about slavery, the reality of it, and they reworded it or rephrased it where it was more acceptable, I guess you could say, as African American workers or something like that. I think it was the article said. So it's kind of like language does play a key role in how we see history too, and I think that's a point that was raised in the article. So
Yeah.
So, but that's not just in high school. And it goes higher. College is another level of craziness. I could have another conversation about that for sure. So thanks for those who shared. Kind of affirms thumbs up if you kind of experience this in your high schools. I want to kind of just get a quick poll. I see a lot of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Anyone else? At least half of you looks like you've experienced something similar to this article, which kind of speaks to our educational system, which needs to be for sure changed in different ways. So how do we change it, I guess, is the thing. Let's start from this class, and hopefully your brilliant minds can figure out how to change society in general, more than I could have done. So y'all were able to share some of your responses. Sorry, we already did. And what are the themes and connections of oppression that you see? Why are these groups overlooked or forgotten, I guess you could say? And the third question was about certain stories or narratives that were omitted. And I want to kind of see from this class what narratives or stories you felt weren't represented well. And real quick, I have a Padlet for folks. Are folks familiar with Padlet? Maybe, maybe not. Yes, okay. So I'm gonna give you a link, and then in that link, you're just gonna take a Post-it, not physically, not literally, take a Post-it, virtually take a Post-it, and put a moment in history you think you felt needed more attention and more explanation, or that you wish was written about or more written about. So I just want to get a sense of where high school textbooks are at this moment. Give me a second as I share the link. So Padlet is another online tool, and I'll open up that. Where are you, Padlet? Oh. Looks like someone got booted off. Let me get that person in again. So for those who aren't familiar with Padlet, this is the website or link I gave you. And then it's a wall. But in this wall, there's a plus button somewhere on the bottom. And in the plus button, there it is, to your bottom right, you press on it, and then you put your name, and then you just write a moment in history that you felt needs to be more recognized. So how's that sound for folks? I'll give you a couple minutes. I just want to get a sense of what you think. If you already came up with an example in your pair share, what other examples are there that you want to bring to the class? Everyone have the link? I don't see anyone else. Do folks have the link? Oh, put your name on top, like I did here. And then in the box where you type, you write a history or a moment where you felt like could have been explained better or represented, like the Filipinos and their contributions to the farm labor movement? What are other aspects of, I guess, our history books that we feel that you think should have been stressed more, or if it wasn't even discussed, what should be discussed? Is that clear? Oh, you're working on it. Okay. Why don't I see other posts?
You might have to refresh your page.
Thank you. Whoa! Never mind. Many examples, it looks like it. So, where do I start? LGBT, very important in their history here in the United States, especially in this current political environment. What does that mean? I'm not sure if you've been following, but the Equality Act rights is supposed to be passed, and let's see if it happens through the Senate.
I couldn't even write my own post
because
it keeps updating too much.
Oh, there's too many of y'all in here. I should have opened up another page. Okay, we're learning as we go. It's my second time using Padlet, but you get the point, right? So Native Americans, who else? Immigration from Central America, what does that history look like? United Farm Workers seems to be a popular one. Chicano movement. What else? Mulatto High School. Whoa, things are heck of moving everywhere. Ooh, this is hard to follow. The act passed on Ronald Reagan, immigrants to receive citizenship. Okay, cool. Vietnam and French colonialism, the Holocaust. What else? These are great examples. I just refreshed it. Native Americans again. Okay, so we have a broad range based on ethnic groups, based on movements, based on those who immigrated here versus the native population before the US became a US. There's a lot of great examples here. Cool, cool. Alrighty. Do folks like Padlet? It's another way to just talk about certain things that you as a class want to talk about. So moving forward, and hopefully that's inspiration for folks like, oh, I want to learn about that. I didn't hear about that before. And we're going to get at that chance. So this semester, we're working on this ethical historiography guideline project. And I put this quote from Malcolm X. We just celebrated African American History Month. And this is what he said. History is a people's memory. And without a memory, a man is demoted to the lower animals. So Malcolm X stresses the importance of remembering, especially if it's the people's history, which has been omitted, forgotten, silenced. And obviously this is a racialized history where these communities who are considered animals, that's a justification for their evident omission in history. And here he's pushing folks to understand that and understand history through the people's lens, I guess. And the principles that this project will focus on are obviously the lens of social justice, this idea of addressing injustice among different marginalized communities. And as a result, their histories aren't necessarily represented or not taught well or remembered well. And in this project, you are able to take that in your own hands and represent them as accurate as possible that you feel like it's important to stress. And there are many periods of history that you all already brought up in the Padlet, and I think use those as starting points for this project. And if you kind of noticed other people with a similar topic, that's already an introduction or invitation for you to probably try to reach out to that person to see if you are okay down to do this chapter project. So what is the principles? Let's explain a little more. So the ethical historical, it's always hard for me to say this word, it's so long. Ethical historiographical guiding principles. Can someone read the first paragraph for me?
I'll do it.
Thank you, Rexel.
The following points are the basis of seeing history through a social justice lens, allowing the historical narrative to take into account the experiences of uncounted and forgotten communities whose treatment has formed the basis for much of modern American behavior and attitudes.
Thank you, Rexel. So, not sure if you remember in the beginning of the class, but we talked about this idea of intersectionality, how our complex identities are shaped by our race, our gender, our sex, sexuality, and our class, to name a few of them. There are a lot more with disability and others. And looking through these lenses and understanding these communities in that way, and why they are forgotten or unaccounted for in our history books is the task that we as a class are going to take on this semester. And can someone read the second one for me?
I can read it.
Thank you, Emily.
Without this framework, we will sorry.
Okay.
Without this framework, we will continue to see history as a series of unrelated events, and thereby will be willing to see disputing sides as simply adversarial without the full understanding of nuance that complicates the simple cause and effect relationship.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, you all listed all these different and wonderful moments in history. As it might seem fragmented on that board of post-its, there is some type of connection, relationship, solidarity amongst these communities. And with the Filipino and the Latinx communities and that farm labor movement, what does that story look like? What does that coalition building look like? And again, that's the task in terms of this project of trying to address that these aren't unrelated events. They actually inform each other in different ways. And it might seem adversarial, like Filipinos versus Latinos, but there's a lesson there, and why it's framed that way in this dominant narrative that we see. And the ethical historian, which is you, looks at history not just from the standpoint of the powerful, but from all sides to see more complete and increasingly multicultural view of history. So if we want to put on our historian hats and trying to figure out a just world in the context of history, what as a class can we do to contribute to these narratives that have been forgotten? And I have a couple chats. Okay. This is the premise, the foundation of this historiographical project. Questions about this? Thoughts? Did I lose anyone? Straightforward. This is the time. So today's class is to focus on this. And I want you to start off on a good footing of why we're doing this and how you might see your role in this project. Questions? Or just comments? Okay, so let's go a little further, taking it step by step for folks. So there's a context. The past should be reported with details and scrutiny towards subtle features of time and place, allowing for the understanding of causes and effects. So things don't happen in vacuums. Things happen as a result of like a push and pull or a cause and effect of social and political things that are going on in communities. And that's what we're trying to kind of bring light to and consider in this project. Can someone read me the perspective one?
I can read it.
Thank you.
Perspective, multiple interpretations of events, their meaning and significance to the various communities and actors involved in the historical moment.
Thank you. So obviously we all come from different backgrounds and we see the world possibly in similar lights or different. And we'll interpret events according to that, our own perspective. Can someone read me the third point?
I can
Complexity.
read it.
Thank you.
Complexity. There are no simple solutions or answers to complex human problems. Some historical situations are ambiguous, and the historian can explore the facets of historical narrative and allow the reader to remain in the ambiguity.
Mm-hmm. So, what are the nuances in these events? Things aren't black and white. They're not just one simple solution. And dealing with people, obviously, we're all influenced by different things in terms of our intersectionality. And in that, how do we, I guess, confront it head on and try to resolve it and address these questions? Next, non-ideological. Who can read that for me?
I'll read it. Specific worldviews or ideologies should be left out of the historical reporting, thereby not locking facts into a system of morality or other dogmatic belief system.
So this kind of focuses on this idea of ideology. If we come from a particular philosophy, understanding of the world, either be it political or religious, what then, how does that frame facts or evidence? And with those things, what is the analysis? So hopefully in this project, you don't get like thrown into a rabbit hole of just one particular view. Next point, objectivity.
Objectivity.
Thank you.
Facts should be presented in full consideration of context, perspectives, and inclusive of ethical dilemmas, so the reader observer can understand the full complexity of an issue or historical moment.
Yes. So we all come with our own subjective perspective, our feelings and thoughts about things. If we step back and look at the facts and the evidence and understand the context of why these events happened, then we could kind of get a bigger and more complex and comprehensive story of that moment. So thank you. Transparency. Anyone?
Any historical investigation should be clear and upfront about the goal and object.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's straightforward. What are your goals and objectives of this research? Being upfront with that. And then lastly, I'll read this one. Sources. Primary and secondary sources should be used accurately without distortion or misrepresentation of objective facts and context. So how do we take these primary and secondary sources and not make our own like twist or bias of it to fulfill our own particular political agenda, I guess you could say. Cool. So these are the 7 things to consider in terms of approaching a project. And I kind of want to quickly go over my own master thesis to give you an example of maybe how to approach a particular moment in history. And I'll just walk you through what I did for my master's thesis a long time ago here at State. But I did it on the anti-martial law movement in the Philippines. And it was there was a group of activists here in the United States who supported that work. And I know some people might be familiar with this, I guess, period of history, which is why I did the research. It's like, it's not often talked about. There was obviously the Philippine president who became the dictator of the Philippines and declared martial law, which is military rule. And here in the United States, there's an organization called the KDP, and they were critical of the dictator, Ferdinand Marcos. And because the Philippines was a colony of the United States, we were sending off military aid there, which became a concern when human rights issues were rising in that country. So that's a little background of the research and why I was kind of doing it. And if we want to go back to those considerations in terms of context, so I was looking at this period of time. Martial law was declared at 1972. These are like facts. And it existed for almost 14 years. So until People Power, which is a peaceful uprising of Filipinos to take down a dictator. So I wanted to learn more about this particular event and why it was important, not just for folks in the Philippines, but how it organized and engaged activists here. And understanding this idea of perspective. So obviously we're here in the United States. What does it mean to have a movement that it looks beyond our borders and looks in solidarity of movements in other countries? And obviously in the development of my research, I was finding that, oh, people didn't agree with this dictator, or they did agree, or sometimes they just focused on what was going on here in the United States rather than what was going on in the Philippines. And on top of that, this was during the civil rights movement. We had things popping off, the civil rights, Asian American movement, anti-war movement, LGBTQI movement. So there was a lot of things going on. And how do we understand these multiple interpretations of the social justice movements that are popping off? And at the same time, look at abroad, how do we support social injustices going on as a result of US's influence? So the complexities. So doing my research, I realized the Philippine American community is not supportive of some social justice issues. So there's a conservative side and a revolutionary side is what they framed back in the day. And obviously this was a challenge for the relationships with their friends, but also with their family members, of how they saw their political identities being shaped by a dictator or in opposition to a dictator in the Philippines. So this non-ideological framework. So back in the day, well, still today too, they were engaged in these different ideologies: Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, feminism, third world feminism, the gay movement to the LGBTQI movement. So there's evolution of these different movements. And I think when you tackle your historical moment, then how do these inform it and contribute to the conversation in that moment, or how do they not? So how how is it limited in terms of these ideological frameworks? So things to consider when you look at your project. Objectivity, what is your relationship with the movement back home in the Philippines, is something that I was trying to understand. our international solidarity. What does it look like in this context? And then a transnational movement. How does the injustice happening in the Philippines also inform what's going on with, for example, Filipinos fighting with Cesar Chavez for better wages and conditions for farm laborers? So what does that mean in an international context, and then a local issue here in the Central Valley? What does that look like? So things to consider. And transparency. I wanted to be honest about this movement. I didn't want to hide, I guess, the skeletons per se, but kind of also say that there are weaknesses in movements. How do we learn from them? But also be respectful to those who went through this process of learning, and not necessarily outcast them or judge them in that light. And how do I, as a researcher, become accountable to these activists? So oftentimes there's this divide of like, I'm an academic, I'm a researcher, and that's all I am. And then when they do the research, they leave or don't talk to these communities again, or these activists in this particular case. So how do I still hold myself accountable to not just their stories, but also the movement that they were part of? And then the sources. Obviously, they were there, they experienced it, they wrote articles, they wrote newsletters, they took pictures. How do I accurately kind of describe their day-to-days? And then this movement lasted for so long. How do I kind of tell that story and the nuances it in a very comprehensive way, and understand what its legacy is here in the United States? So hopefully that was a good example for folks. I don't know, give me any feedback if that's helped in terms of how you're going to process your historiographical project. I just threw a lot at you, but I wanted to get through it and give you an example, at least through my own research. Thoughts? Was it helpful, at least, to have an example like this? Yes, thank you, Rexel. I appreciate it. Others? Yes, yes, yes. I guess y'all doing yes. I guess I have to wait at least 10 seconds for y'all to respond. Thank you again. So kind of use this like as an example in terms of how you're going to approach it. You won't necessarily have the same questions, but maybe some of it might be useful to how you're approaching as a historian yourself in this project. So we have about 15 minutes. Kind of want to just break you up into groups and just brainstorm. You initially thought of the textbooks in our high schools about certain topics, and this might be kind of like a starting point. But now you get to talk to a group of your peers to identify certain topics that you think would be important. And then in the next session, I'll kind of want to follow up with that and see if that's something you want to do. And then how I could maybe facilitate finding that group for you all. And what that looks like, or maybe you already have people in mind that you want to work with and a topic. So at this moment, for now, we're just going to brainstorm about possible topics in your groups. How's that sound for folks? Yeah, okay. So try to give you time in class to do certain things, so it's not like you're doing it on your own. And then let me give you the link. So for this next portion, you will kind of just jot down notes of those topics. So as I lose my voice, give me a second. All right, here's the link. And then in your breakout rooms, just throw it out there. There's no limit to how many topics you have. I just want you to just brainstorm whatever you think would be a great topic to kind of do for your historiography project. So that's the link. Oh no, that's the Padlet. Did it not copy? Just kidding. Well, in reference, that's the Padlet. If you want to see everyone else's examples, this is a Google link. Let me know if you could open it. I see a few people on it already. And then for the next 12 minutes, is probably 10 minutes, maybe come up with 10 possible topics that in your group can do. And I'll list these up and maybe talk about it on Thursday. And I'll, if you're a person that wants to do that topic, then maybe we'll figure out how to coordinate that. So what's next? The groups. So I'll put you in groups of 4. And I think we're waiting for one group, but everyone else is here. Yep. Okay, looks like everyone's back. So hopefully you have some ideas, at least starting points for your project. And I was able to review some of them. Some of them are very like open. What I mean by that is like folks were saying Native American history, and that encompasses a lot. So I think the next step here would be like kind of focusing in a little more in terms of like, is it recent history, like the last 10 years, maybe around the pipeline movement, or is it more really back in the day? So I think these are things that you will discuss as a group to kind of, because you can't do that in a whole. I would love to hear all your stories about the whole history of it, but that's a whole class and book or multiple books, and I don't think you will have the time to do all that. But to make it a little more simpler and more concise and focused, particular moment with this particular community. Is that helpful? So just things to think about with the examples that you all put out there. These are the readings for the next session. So we're going to learn about the 1921 Greenwood Massacre and what the community said during that time. And then there's an assignment. You're going to submit your notes about that reading on iLearn. And that's pretty much it for today. Have a great day. If there's any questions, I'll hang out for a second. But thank you everyone for being here, being present, despite I know all the challenges you're facing. And I'm going to try to reach out to those that are having a little more difficult time. But I'll see you all later. See you Thursday.